Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is the third episode of the Cosmic Gateway Roundtable with Practitioners, and I'm so super ecstatic to have such powerhouses join me on this collaboration. So we've rotated, and we've got some beautiful soul sisters joining me today. So the topic that we'll be discussing is such a big and broad topic. So we're going to be discussing and breaking down ascension and what that means for us individually, our experiences, how we support people through the ascension process. And obviously we want to be able to share some tips and tricks and things that are going to assist you at home and all the beautiful souls who are watching. So welcome, ladies. Thank you. I'll go through. So starting from the top, from my screen, we've got Jen from Infused with Light. And we have Ana, a new face with us from Vitraya. We've got the lovely Jo Brooks from Awakening to the Light Within. And certainly not least, but lucky last, we've got Katie Jane from
Vibrosound here.
Vibrosound. I always felt like I needed thank you for the prompting there. Thank you, ladies, and welcome to this collaboration. As I mentioned in the earlier episodes, this sort of came together as a fusion based off practitioners training that we all did together in the beginning of the year, and that literally feels like years or lifetimes ago now. And so we're going to kick off and we're going to talk a little bit about ascension. And so I'm going to give my perspective of, I guess, my definition. So, you know, we went through awakening, and I see awakening and ascension as sort of, they're not separate, they're interlinked, but it's like one is like the precursor to the next. So it's like the next phase, the next level. So I see the ascension process as more of the energetic embodiment of the process that we go through. So it's almost like a alchemical process, because we're going from a carbon-based body to a more crystalline form. So with that comes an immense amount of clearing. I know you don't like this word, Ana, but purging, releasing. So for the pure essence, that we can break down the density that we hold in our body, or that we've held in our body, so that we can attain more light. And so the way that I see it in the, the energy work that I do and what we worked on together is, we clear from this lifetime, so any traumas that are held mentally, emotionally or energetically, which can store in the body, past lifetimes. So the way that I say it, whatever we've accumulated through our 3D incarnations. And then of course there's the DNA aspect, the ancestral, what we carry through our lineage, and that can be carried up to maybe more, but 7 generations is generally the rule of thumb. So it's a massive process, and generally it comes through, as we all know in the spiritual community, as a tower moment, where we go through upheavals in our life, and we start to break down living from that third dimensional reality, and we start to move in living in a higher energetic embodiment. And therefore, because our body is going through such a massive process, everything else starts to change as well. So we start to leave our jobs and start to build businesses and do this type of work, although it doesn't necessarily have to look like that. A lot of time relationships go through a transformational breakdown or separation if it's missing alignment with that higher vibrational reality that we're moving into. So it really takes a massive amount of work on so many different levels. And obviously we might cover the physical symptoms that we go through, but also the gifts that come through this. And there's so much beauty in it, even though it's goddamn hard work at times. And I think that today's probably even though I would consider today not an optimal day for filming for me, today's been a very, very low energy day. So it's been a bit of a struggle to get here and switch on the camera and speak to you all. But I think that is a perfect example of what ascension is. And every day it's like a mixed bag. You don't know what you're going to expect, because there are so many influences, and of course increasing in sensitivity. And so I know that probably Jen could pick up that topic, a little bit more, but talking about light sensitivity, sound sensitivity. Katie, you can comment on energetic sensitivity and energy hygiene. So there's so many things that we can cover in this topic, and it is so vast. So we may even need to break it down in multiples, depending on how we go. But I guess I first want to throw out to you guys, if you'd like to share something from your own personal experience of, like, can you pinpoint when I know I can pinpoint when my ascension process hit. It was very defined, because I believe that I'm someone who's been awake most of my life, but yet there was a very significant moment in my life where I was like, what I call, I hit my ascension point, and everything changed after that moment. So I'll throw it out to you guys, whoever wants to jump in. Is there something that you can think of that was the catalyst for hitting your ascension point?
Oh, I'll go first. I feel like I never really share. As you were speaking, I was like, when did it all begin? Because I'm quite young, and I feel like I've been doing this for such a long time already. And I just remembered, and I never really share, but I got really sick. I was living in Colombia, and I was pretty much well off my path to where I am now. And there was one evening I started to feel really, really sick. And that night I was reading my book, and such a crazy experience. My whole vision kind of dissipated, and a bunch of what I now know is light codes, green light codes, started flowing into my third eye. And I had never experienced anything like that before. And it happened for maybe, like, obviously free of time and space, but now it felt like maybe 10 minutes. And I fell back and I passed out, and then I woke up the next day, and I got dengue fever, and all of the bones in my body felt like they were shattering and breaking. And I went to the hospital, and I stayed in hospital for 2 weeks, and then they flew me back to Australia. And then it was like an 18-month process, realizing now that it was such a brutal beginning, like such a get on track. And I think at that time it was really hard it was like a mental, spiritual, emotional, lifestyle, physical breakdown all at once. And I think at that time I didn't understand what any of that was. And now I look back, and it's such an interesting way to be like, whoa, they just filled me with it's like I downloaded a whole computer system in one night, and my whole body took like 2 years. I couldn't walk or move very well to integrate all of that information. So that's like the craziness of that awakening. And then over the course of, when was that, like 2014, 2015? Yeah. So it was like 2 years of getting physically better, and then emotionally, the emotional pattern started, and I had to go and look at everything. So yeah.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I've known you for what seems to be a huge amount of time, and I didn't know that about you. So I think you brought in some really key points, is that it can, that point can, for a lot of people, be physical illness and sickness. But what I loved about it was that multi-dimensional awareness that you had, that you were having an energetic upgrade, no doubt. And then obviously the physical body was impacted, which, that's a big journey. That's so intense, especially to not really know or understand. And I guess most of us don't, and hence the reason for making these videos, because at that time, a lot of us don't have the comprehension of what's happening. The good thing now is there's a lot more information and more people going through this experience. But back then, that would have been some
There's
really
nothing. I remember looking on the internet being like, what does it mean seeing green matrix symbol flying into face? Like, and of course I got diagnosed with like mental health disorders and stuff. So I think now it's so much safer to have these experiences, whereas before it was like straight to the diagnoses of different things.
Wow, thank you, Katie. And it's so funny that you mentioned that, because obviously just before we started recording, I'll be honest, we all had a bit of the giggles and we were trying to just center and focus ourselves. And as I was doing that, I literally, as you described, I saw matrix green coding coming in, and I was like, wow, that's a new experience. And when you said, I was like,
Damn.
oh, I'm going to be in for an upgrade later. And again, thank you. Have you ladies got anything else that you want to share about your own journey, or a specific experience that kind of cast your mind to something that was like, okay, that? Yeah, go for it, Jo.
I think we're all playing very polite, aren't we?
Yeah. Are you going to just rip that apart?
Compared to when we're normally all chatting. Yeah, I mean, for me, as most of you already know, I felt like I didn't belong here from being a child. As a child, I used to see things, I used to know things, I was very much, and it just kind of made me feel more of a weirdo, more like I didn't fit. And so I did the compliance thing, and I kind of turned my back on a whole bunch of that kind of stuff, and complied and did what would be the normal human life existence. And things just got worse and worse and worse. And I can remember my divine counterpart kind of kicked in, which was a huge life-changing event. But I can remember, prior to making huge decisions, for me, I had a conversation with my mum, and I was like, if I don't do this, I think I'm going to die. And I almost chuckle to myself now, because I think, God, she was so extreme. But it wasn't that I thought I'm just going to drop and die, like, the fly stops flying. It was just my essence, my soul was screaming at me, and I just kind of felt like it had just got smaller and smaller and smaller, and that was the pivotal point of change for me in my life. And then followed the emotional, as you've said, Katie, the emotional unraveling, the physical unraveling, the layers and layers of ancestral trauma, all of these different things that have needed to be cleared, to then get to that point where you can look back and you can go, oh, it was such a gift. But while I was in it, I just thought, why am I being punished this way? So that was kind of, the big explosive, almost implosive at the same time. It's just everything going on all at once. And as you said, Alisha, I kind of felt very lost in that space, because I just thought I had mental health problems. At that point, when everything started to unravel, I questioned my own sanity. And thank goodness these kind of videos are being put out now, whereby people can kind of couple up and see what the bigger picture is.
Yeah. I think that the importance of sharing and personal stories and relatable stories is so important, because in a world where things can be very quickly diagnosed or jumped on, I think, I've mentioned this many times before, I worked in mental health, and there's such a fine line, like, it's in what people talk about in having, diagnosed, and then what people go through during a spiritual awakening, it's one and the same. It's just a different perspective of seeing it and understanding it. So.
And then the gifts start coming, and you realise what an absolute gift it was. So yeah.
I'm glad that you put that in about how hard it is, but it's well worth it. And I think such a key point that you mentioned, in the sense that you thought that you were going to die, and the word that comes up that's kind of been in my mind the last couple of days is like course correction. It's almost like
Mm.
the soul aspect or the higher self aspect, you know, comes in at that point. It's like, right, you know, we sent you down here for a specific
My
mission.
higher self was like, you are not here to play house, just saying.
And you know, depending on where our lives are at and what we came here to do, you know, that's where, so I think that's the ascension point, is when it kind of clicks in. You know, we could be having this kind of lifestyle over here in a very 3D manner, and you know what we came to do is over here, and it comes here, and then it's like boom. So it can be really dramatic for some people, and I guess it can be slow and subtle for other people. Every person's experience is going to be, but it's like that knowing. And I guess, I don't know if you would agree with me, Joe, but you know, the old way of your living did die in essence, like an aspect of you. That
and I think what's also really interesting about that is that I mean, there's so many barriers within yourself that you need to overcome, especially, and when I look back now, we've spoke quite extensively at previous points about, you know, the roles we play and the masks we wear, and I always felt that I was a chameleon, because I could just kind of put myself into any situation, know what people required, and be that. And the one person that was neglected in all of that, and the one essence that was neglected in all of that, was myself. And yeah, I looking back now, I just think I'm amazed that I managed to live an alternate life for such a long time, as opposed to the one I was supposed to be here to live.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that, because I think for so long we wear hats and we people please, and we do all sorts of things that we think, you know, that we're conditioned to do, and then one day it's like and of course, you know, the twin aspect, the counterpart aspect, that's a whole other topic for another day. But I think a lot of people, but probably everyone on this call, to be honest, has had that abrupt awakening through that experience. And I think that's part of what it's designed to do, is to bring that soul essence. I like that. Click. Click. How about you, ladies? Anything that sort of...
I was gonna just, when Joe was just talking, then I was the death thing. It's something that I don't really talk about, but I felt like so my awakening was twin flame, divine counterpart, catalyst. But then my ascension happened like about 6 months from that point on, and I went through a point of thinking I was physically dying. Like I had migraine after neurological stroke symptoms, and I just was hammered. I couldn't function, I couldn't work, I was losing my vision, I couldn't function, I just couldn't see. I was losing like feeling on the side of my body. So I had to go through all this like physicality aspect, and then once that was starting to get better, I went through a huge year of emotional death. And I know it's a hard topic to talk about, but I spent that year having suicidal thoughts every single like day. It was so hard. It was so intense. I just didn't understand what was happening. I started seeing colors. I just thought I was having a mental breakdown, and I went down that route of exploring with other people. And then it can be really scary to people, I think, and a lot of people won't sort of talk about that darkness, but it was very heavy for me. I'm super grateful that I went through it, because I had to purge so much density, both within my own emotional body and the ancestral stuff. Because if I didn't do that, there's no way I could have created room and space for the gifts that were coming through. And for my gifts to be able to reach that level of clearing emotions within other people. So that's, my ascension was so, just the onslaught of physical, like, it was just so disabling to me. And I'm really lucky. And my boss at the time was super supportive. And because I'd be in his office and I'd be looking around and I'd be seeing colors, and I just didn't know what was happening to me. So I had to kind of really, and then I had my mum's like death on top of it. And then that like pushed me through to like another level of like my ascension and more symptoms and things. So mine was definitely very brutal, very intense. But I'm glad it's sort of, I've done that first graduation. So
Thank you for putting it in that context, Jen, because I think that's something that should be brought up, is that there is layers and different levels of graduation, you know, that we continually go through. And I think it is important, you know, like to hear you talk about that and to see where you are now, like totally worth it. But I can relate, and in my own way, of like how dark the dark night of the soul is, and that's very much a part of that ascension process. And I think it should be talked about, because I think right now there are so many people on the planet probably at that point, with all things that are going on. And what I also find really interesting about, like, you and Katie both had that physical, that like real physical slap, I'll call it that. I don't know what
I
else.
almost died.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the
And
hospital they were like, "You are
Same.
almost dead."
Yeah, and I was seeing neurologist after neurologist, and they're like, we don't know what's wrong with you, but my brain, like the MRI, nothing was showing up, but it was like I'd had a stroke, like I was presenting symptoms of someone who had gone through major brain bleeding. Yeah.
And nothing was sort of.
No, I went through like a whole heap of tests. I mean, I still suffer migraines, and I take medication for it, and I changed my diet and heavy metals, and sort of extracting that and educating myself about my brain I had to, because I couldn't function. I was like, I can't get out of bed. I can't even look outside. I can't even look down and realize that my hands are my hands. It's called shadow limbs, when you can't identify that your body's attached to itself.
Wow.
Yeah, it was intense.
It's really fun. Thank you for bringing that to light and discussing that and sharing that with us.
It's interesting on the physical, if I can add in, it's interesting on the physical, all of the different, Jen, that sounds so brutal, all of the different mini courses or mini degrees I got in Ascension, like with the dengue fever, no one knew about it, so I had to go and learn about detoxifying the body. And then I did the Gerson therapy to release from the severe endometriosis, and I learned how to detoxify from heavy metals, had to do enemas, had to understand micro and macronutrients, and all of these different ways to purge, and like the naturopath degree, the homeopathy, all of the different little things that you pick up on along the way that I now am looking at and being like, oh, you actually know so much stuff because of this.
Yeah.
It's kind of beautiful when you look at it from the perspective of how much you get educated through the searching, because there aren't conventional answers. From a spirit perspective, I'm like, that's kind of really clever, you know, because I can kind of relate to that.
Because I didn't have to pay anyone for a 3-year degree.
Yeah.
Just had to save my own life.
Neurologist, pretty much.
Right, and this is the thing. It's like it doesn't. You know, there's a lot of almost. I have to say the word brutality in the way that the physical has been gone through things, or the emotional, or the mental, and all of these different facets can literally feel like it's so brutal. But by design, and this is where the smile comes in. By design, and by the nature of it, every single one of us will be working alongside the things that we learn along the way, the important gifts that actually came in relation to the things that we went through. So at the time, you can literally just be sitting there thinking, what's going on? And then you get to this certain place and you're like, oh wow, that's kind of stunning. I mean, it wasn't, but it really is.
I would never wish it upon anyone, but on reflection, I had to go through it, because light language is so cerebral, and the people that come to me are getting activated in their third eye. So I had to know every aspect and facet of rewiring and heavy metals and detoxing, and how nerves and the central nervous system work. Otherwise, I couldn't explain that to other people when that information's being downloaded in that neurological sense.
And I just want to add in there, because and I want to get to you in a second, Anna, but I realize that you haven't shared, but you know, one of my I just want to share this for people, because you know, soul purpose is such a a sought after thing, especially in these days. And I'm a big believer that, you know, whatever our journey is contributing and making and pathing the way to what our purpose and mission is through our own lived experience. And from that experience we embody it, and then we you know, then give back in service the accumulated, you know, path that we've taken, so that we can help people on a similar path. And I think a huge part of how we then flip into, you know, working from that higher dimensional space is that brutal process that we go through, but it's also the energy embodiment that we go through that becomes the extension of how we give and how we can serve. Because, you know, how do I say this diplomatically? You know, I think that we're all healers in our own right in different ways, and we become that through our experience. You know, anyone can go and do a course, but what I get really excited about in terms of you guys and the beautiful souls that I work with is it's the energy embodiment that is held as an extension of what you can carry and do to support and work with other people, because of the experience and, you know, the craziness that we get put on this ride. So yeah, but I'm going to throw it over to you, Ana. Is there anything that you feel that you want to share about, like, your own?
Yes. Spiritual awakening probably for me started 2013, when I woke up New Year's Day and saw the sunrise and got over a substance abuse, which I had for about 2 years. Never touched it again since. It was followed by 2 years of depression that no one knew about, because I didn't tell anyone and I didn't talk about it back then. But my ascension started when I met you. Like, activated. It's like,
who are you pointing at?
So relatively new to the ascension process. What's it been, 4 or 5 months or whatever? But there's certainly been a lot of changes, and now I kind of just surrender to it. If I go to bed at night and I don't get a wink of sleep because I'm watching someone talk, that's cool. I'll nap tomorrow. Yeah, so Ascension definitely started with you, and, you know, something about divine counterparts in there as well. But yeah,
a bit of a fusion. And I think it's beautiful that you mentioned that, because, you know, the rapidness in people's process and the ability for them to go from 0 to 100 with the energetic climate. Doesn't matter if you've been on this path for 20 years or 2 weeks, you know, people are really getting up to speed, and that's a wonderful thing. But also, I think you have so much to give and share in terms of, like, that connect. It's almost like that sunrise moment. I've heard you talk about that before. That was almost like you know, the universe speaking to you, or source speaking to you, and how you changed and turned your life around. And I know it wasn't easy, but to be able to share that gift in your own experience with other people who may be going through wanting to come off, you know, different substances and things like that. So
yeah. What's been great though is, you know, I've met Joe, I've sort of met Katie, and definitely Jen and yourself. Having someone to talk to about the crazy experiences that happen in terms of ascension symptoms. So, you know, you get on a call and, like, this is happening, some energy movement kind of stuff, or whatever ascension symptoms that you think, you know, you can't talk to your family or friends about. So that's been a real blessing. And I think I was just telling you either today or yesterday, I can't remember, but yeah, that definitely helps, having someone to talk to about it.
Yeah, right.
I want to echo that, because I think sometimes I might find myself in a situation whereby I've got a really upset stomach for a couple of weeks, or, you know, my system's clearing, or I've been downloading, or I'm just basically getting tons of information and my ears are going and my vision doesn't work properly. And it dependent, if I'm just kind of having a standard conversation, someone's like, are you okay? And I'm like, oh, my vision just keeps going and my ears, and they're like, have you seen a doctor?
Yeah.
Obviously, that's everybody's first natural response. And I have to caveat that with, if you genuinely concerned, obviously go and see a doctor. However, when you are in an ascension process, your physical body, the being able to transmute the different energies and being able to clear the different levels so that you can hold higher frequencies, and all of this, you know, DNA restructuring and purging and receiving of information and just the colossal amount of stuff that goes on, can really have some fucked uppery results on the body. And all of your friends that are not on this journey will be like, you really need to go to the doctor. And I'm always like, yeah, okay. And I never do. And it always fails.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's a great segue, isn't it? Thank you, Jo. And we can maybe move into a little bit talking about ascension symptoms. And, you know, obviously, thank you for the disclaimer, because of, you know, we want people to seek the right support if there is something that's physically wrong. But obviously, as we've shared, a lot of us have had, and I know my entire life has been based around having different symptoms and no diagnosis, you know, and I think that's probably what led me into working with energy and understanding it, because I know that working with energy can clear and create miracles, you know, but it's not for everyone. Everyone has a different energetic and physiological, I can't even say it, help me out here.
Physiological.
Thank you. Makeup. And so it has to be very, very, you know, individual and unique. And I know that my body is just not built for medical. You know, there are time and place for that, and there has been in my life, but very far and few in between, because I'm not built like that. You know, I'm a bit of a galactic star seed, and quite often we have weird and wonderful things that go on in our bodies that can't be, you know, it's very multi-dimensional, so it can't be picked up on medical 3D technology is how I like to put it. But, you know, my rule of thumb with ascension symptoms is generally you'll get hit with them, and if they haven't passed in 3 days, then probably do some exploration around that. But ascension symptoms tend to just sort of come in and go out, generally speaking. But I'll throw it over to you guys, and what comes to mind, you know, in the weird and wonderful things that our bodies do in terms of the physical ascension symptoms.
Well, I was just going to say, so when I'm extremely light sensitive anyway. It's very rare for me not to have my sunglasses on, even during this. And people like to think that I'm a paparazzi crazy person. But totally. So I went and so this is part of this balance of like medical versus ascension. When I was going through it, I was like, right, I was telling my dad, and I was just like, I have to see an ophthalmologist. This is, you know, so I got a referral, I went to an ophthalmologist. I did the vision test, and it was 20, like I got the highest, there's all these beeping dots everywhere. I got the highest accuracy. I couldn't see. I didn't know what I was doing. And they're like, there is nothing wrong with your eyes. And I'm like, I cannot see out of my right eye. And so that's when I started to just be like, it's important if you are experiencing it to sometimes rule out all that medical stuff, because that's how by the power of deduction, I went, oh, okay, I could relax and be like, oh, so there's actually nothing wrong with my brain. Like there's no tumor, there's nothing, there's no bleed. And then it was a little bit disconcerting for a while, but you can sit with that and then just go, shit, that's something else that's doing that. And then I started to have dreams and things, little pieces of information came to me that way. So I got comfort in a different way. So that's kind of like a reversal, I suppose, of like, I was very like obsessed with finding an answer medically, because it was and my dad was starting to get really worried about me too. And I didn't know whether it was grief triggering it, or so I did it that way.
I think that's beautiful to share, because I always, you know, will encourage people, if there is something quite serious, even if it's just for peace of mind, go and have it checked out, so then you can rule out a possibility that may have just an easy solution, you know. But then obviously when it doesn't, then that's when it takes a lot of sort of getting to know your own body, trusting your intuition messages, the support that you have non-physically to help guide you and navigate you through whatever
it was
is
funny after I'd kind of had that peace of mind of like, oh, so my eyes are kind of, I remember staring in the mirror for ages looking at them, and it wasn't long after that then I started to see colors. Like my eyes had gone through, it's like having new eyes. I could see auras and things for the first time. So that was one of the gifts coming out of that.
That's phenomenal. I'd love more examples of like ascension symptoms and then how gifts have come on. That's great. Sorry, Jo.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, just adding to that, it's really good that you said that as well, Jen, because I think sometimes, dependent on how far you are, that's another one. I know, my God, I can't even say that. Dependent on how far in you are.
Yeah.
As you said earlier, Anna, that you kind of, you're surrounded by a whole bunch of people that are living this way, and you've completely surrendered to it. And I think that's fantastic that when you're in communities that can support and love and kind of do all of that with each other. But for people that aren't, for them to kind of go through these processes, again, so in tune with awakening, we question absolutely everything. And part of that whole medical structure of how things are or how things should be, getting those answers that actually that isn't what it is, kind of brings them to a place of trust and surrender that potentially having a spiritual or a awakened community would do.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Yeah. It is hard for people out there that don't have anyone to talk to and share those things. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I didn't. I'm a perfect example of that. I was skeptical, grew up in a really scientific-y based house. And so for me, it's like, no, medical's the answer. Like, there's got to be a medical explanation.
Yeah.
And I was desperate to find out what was going on with me.
Even sometimes now I find I don't share any experiences or symptoms that I have. Sometimes they're a little bit embarrassing, so you keep it to yourself until the moment passes and then you share it. Like the Kundalini energy that I experienced a couple of weeks ago. Like, is this in my head or is this happening? But there are lots of other things that you don't really want to share immediately, but later on maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've sorry, go on, Katie.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, when I first started awakening, I was really, they couldn't find anything in my bloodstream with the dengue, but they called it dengue and they did all of these tests. And then when I came home, I started to realize, which was the first time ever, I started to be able to understand. It was super creepy. As I was feeling sick and purging, like I had to get the ambulance a few times. I was living alone. I didn't have any family around. My dad was in Saudi. All my friends overseas. And I started to be like, this is it. It's just me. And then I started to be like, what is this? And as I was like, the floor was giving out and I was just going, it was just crazy. And I started to realize that the emotional, it's like memory bubbles started to come up. And I was like, if this is causing me the pain, can I release it? And my body started to physically purge and I started to throw up. And once I'd done that, I was like, what else is there? And I started to understand that I could interplay with my purging process and find what that stagnancy was and release that out through my body. And it was like I started to play this game of like, what's there? How can I release it? And what am I letting go? And I found that I had a really beautiful, it wasn't beautiful, it was horrific, but like a interesting thought, emotion, body connection. And I felt empowered to be able to be like, okay, I'm releasing this now. And that the gift of that is to now understand when I'm doing a sound ceremony to be able to effectively release all of my experiences in a safe, contained way, rather than feeling. And also I would add a gift that I have from this, and I feel like most of you guys may have, is the gift of empathy. So now I understand when someone comes into my field, because I have done so much purging, I can feel exactly in their body. I can feel like all of their things. So that's great as a therapist, and someone comes in, they're like, I don't know how I feel. I'm like, well, what's this here? What's that feeling behind your eyes? What's this? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And then we dig deeper, and then they know, and then we let it go.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, Katie, because that's exactly what I was thinking, because I can't think of anything that I want to share about physical, but I was like, for me, I always believe that like my greatest challenge my entire life was my emotional sensitivity or energetic sensitivity. And after I hit my ascension point, I also realized that I was tapping into other people's thought processes too, which is really not nice, especially when you're picking up on people's subconscious thoughts. They're quite dark. And when you're not aware of that and you think that, you start to take on that projection, thinking that that's you take it on as your own, not realizing that you're picking up on other people's thought forms. And I think that's what makes us, excel in what we do in terms of working with people going through the ascension process, is that we've built up this really refined energetic sensitivity that we can tap into people and then help support them if they aren't aware, in what they're going through, if they're not. I know that for me, I will literally from the moment someone books a session, I will connect with them energetically, and I will go through whether it's physical, emotional, mental process prior to connecting with them, and not realize until they start speaking. And I was like, oh, that's what that was, or all of a sudden I'll just have like a really, really painful sore knee and I can't walk. I'm like, what is this? Like out of nowhere. And then I'll jump into a session and then they're, sprain their knee. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. and I've had that all my life. Like I will literally, I think it's like an energetic merging, not merging, but like
receptivity.
I don't know. It's almost like you just kind of you just take it on. I guess you it's like it being a sponge, really. And all my life, working with people and family members, just constantly have weird, this and that. So I really got. I guess that's one technique and one thing to share is I've really got good at like identifying what's mine and what's not mine. And I think that's probably a really good highlighter point, is to start to have that awareness that if you are energetically sensitive or you are empathic, to be discerning when you are being an energetic sponge, because that serves a purpose too, because quite often people forging this path do a lot of clearing for collective, or other people, whether we like it or not.
That's something that I actually wanted to add, because funnily enough, before coming on to this morning, I shared a meme on my page, and it was, some people can touch and feel nothing, and other people can touch nothing and feel everything. And for me, it felt so structured around the importance of people that do clearing for other people, and funnily enough, I did the post about that exact thing this morning, so as you're sitting there I'm going and for so many people as well, I think I mean I'll put my hand up and I'll say, yeah, fair enough, when I was a child I could feel things, I just knew things, I didn't understand it, and then I kind of neglected it and switched it off as best I could, I think, and just tried to be the chameleon. But I feel like there's so many people that are the energetic climate, if we want to call it that, has been so strong that a lot of people that are waking up, they're coming online, they are now becoming energy sensitive, they are becoming empathic, they are becoming intuitive. And that discernment that you spoke about of being able to know what's yours, but also for me, going back to the physical, I get a lot of tummy stuff, upset tummies, really bad reflux, etc., etc., etc. And I know when that's happening, it's because I'm clearing more collective energy and it's filtering through my system, and I have to be really, really careful with what I eat or what I drink, because everything can tip the balance. the other one for me, which I know you'll laugh at, Alisha, was I never used to sound like this. And then becoming a BQH practitioner and obviously taking people into those kind of spaces, my voice lowered, my tone became different. And I can remember going through this process of continually having sore throats and coughing. And now I've got this new Barry White toned, ease you in voice, which apparently I was supposed to have. So again, another physical shift to enable a gift, I guess.
I love in the sharing, because I can relate to that. I think my voice has changed over the years, and like Anna brought that to my attention just today. Yeah.
Yeah, your voice has changed last year and even from last week.
There we go. Constant shifting. Another thing that I haven't mentioned this at all, basically to anyone, but a couple of weeks ago, I was looking in the mirror, and my eyes have changed. I now have brown spots around my pupil, which I never had before. So I don't know what's going on there.
That's totally a physical ascension sign. I read a post, like, my face has changed so much. So, do you ever look in the mirror and you're like,
yeah,
what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
My eyes change. That's a big one for me. And each time I go through a massive ascension, I get another brown dot in my.
Ooh.
Especially, and so the side that my brain is most affected is the eye has more brown dots in it, because that's the side of my body that has had the most physical trauma attached to it.
All right. See, I should have spoken to my soul sisters, because I kept tight-lipped. And I was like,
I kind of want to throw a question to you all. When you said about your face changing, Alisha, I know people that I knew 5-6 years ago that all say to me, you look so different. Like, you look, I don't know, almost younger, like more. And sometimes I sit and I think, God, the shit that we go through, I'm surprised I don't look like I've literally slept in a bin for the last 4 days. But you do, your whole, it shifts, doesn't it?
I feel like I'm getting younger too. Like, I look at myself and I am like, galactic Botox is working. So, like,
well,
do it.
can I just throw in, like, my catalyst, I had an abrupt Kundalini awakening, and from that everything switched on, high definition, pineal gland pop, voila. And I was just charging energy for months and months and months. And I remember going to see, I had an appointment with a lady who, see every few weeks or whatever. And she was like, oh, I had been overseas and come back, and she was like, oh my goodness, did you have work done overseas? I was like, what? And she goes, did you have Botox done? And I was like, no. She goes, your skin, it's glowing. And I was like, oh. And I remember at that time, I was emanating light. And I guess to the physical senses, you would look different. Yeah, so I guess the perks of ascension, right? Start to look younger, glowing, radiating.
To the point where people don't recognize you. On the weekend, I said hello to 3 people who I knew, and it was the creepiest thing. One of them I knew quite well, and he just looked at me and he's like, hi, and just walked away as if he'd never met me before. And it's weird how your energy can go so undercover sometimes and shift so rapidly that in the space of 6 months, people don't recognize me.
I kind of
crazy.
just want to jump down the time loop rabbit hole, which we're not on right now.
Let's go there. Let's go there.
Do it.
I was going to say, like, I'm conscious of time, and I know that we could probably roll this into 2-part series. Can you hold that thought, and can we dive into that? Is that like a whole segment, Jo? Or
well, I mean, for me personally, knowing you ladies as well as I do, I think if I hold that thought, that will be a whole big rabbit hole for all of us, because we all have something to say. I mean, you're all galactic goddesses, come on.
Yeah, well, I think maybe we should go into that, and timelines and galactic. connection might be a good one. But I just want to say on the physical note, you know, obviously we talked about eye color changing, and we've talked about glowing skin. You know, one thing that I've had a couple of times over the last couple of years is literally light emanating from my skin, and I know that that's something that a lot of people have experienced. And you know, from the very first thing that I mentioned coming into this video is like our bodies are literally changing into a crystalline structure. So we will be, you know, holding a lot more light and energy and frequency in our body, and our body is changing in that way. And it's amazing when that happens. And generally it's through a very physical compression process where, you know, you'll go through an intensity where you do think that you're dying, and then you're reborn, that death and rebirth over and over again. But it looks like, it looks like glitter on the skin. It's absolutely
Amazing.
It is amazing. It's stunning. So I guess final thoughts, ladies, in terms of ascension and symptoms, you know, for people at home and the beautiful people who are watching this, you know, what would you offer as any sort of guidance, or how people can best, obviously, if you feel that you want to support and you resonate with any of these beautiful women, there will be all the details in the description box below of how you can follow them and connect with them, or perhaps even book a session. But practical things that people can do at home.
Get an energy alignment with Alisha Brachet. It will change your whole life.
It'll just activate you even more. You'll love it.
Have a bath and eat some dal and ground.
I would definitely say pair yourself up with people who are, all of us obviously, who are empathetic. But I will, and I have said so many times, if it wasn't for Alisha and if it wasn't for Joe, I possibly would not have survived my ascension. If it gets that bad, you have to, I did reach out to the medical counselor type of world, but you also have to verbalize it. You have to, like, you have to overcome all those like emotional issues that you have, because I just think, God, what if I had killed myself? Like, then there'd be less of this in the world. So I think that's not what this new earth is about. And so if you are really struggling, just make sure you are talking to someone, whether that is on a very medical level. But if you are highly energetically sensitive, Alisha has helped me phenomenally, and also Joe, because quantum healing allows you to access things that the egoic mind structures can't process. So I would definitely encourage talking on any level to anyone.
I'd agree with the energy alignment. That was definitely, sorry, did I cut you off, Joe?
No, go.
Okay. The energy alignment, definitely. But things that I started doing for me, because you can't share every thought, every fear, every, you know, new thought processes that comes to mind. Definitely journaling, even just writing, drawing symbols, weird messages that you get, get that out. That for me has been, did you get weird messages, Katie?
I was just thinking about you getting weird messages.
Great. Yeah, definitely writing them down, getting it out of your head, because even, you know, in your sleep or with the minute you wake up or after meditation, so much thought patterns are different now. Like the way I think doesn't seem familiar to me anymore. So yeah.
It's really good guidance and advice. Absolutely.
And eating. I feel like eating and grounding.
And
eating a lot.
Yeah.
And potatoes.
Obviously, potatoes saved my life, people. They are like the most grounding emotional food. But I was also going to say too, don't be afraid to feel everything in its entirety, because if you resist it, it is only going to worsen physically and emotionally. So as hard as that was for me, once I had a support network and I felt safe enough to feel it, obviously you need to make sure you are managing your mental health. Then I was like, right, and I do this with Joe a lot. I was like, I'm going to go into those depths, because I know there's hidden treasure in there. It just takes a while to find them.
Yeah. I'd like to add, I love water. For me, water's a big thing. Immersing myself in water, showers, energy cleaning in any form. If you are in a space whereby you feel like you've absorbed or sponged other people's energy, just set an intention and clean it, and surrender. And that is the hardest thing to do, I think, for most people, because we are programmed and conditioned from birth to need to know how everything is and how everything looks. And on this journey, I think one of the hardest things is not knowing. So kind of getting over, like you said, Jen, whether you're talking to a doctor or whether or not you're talking to a like-minded friend that might understand, being able to get past yourself and actually be able to do that and to open up and kind of, because the one thing that I will say is that once you've awakened and then you've started ascending, you can't go back. There is no going back.
There's no blue pill.
It's not an option. And the longer that we resist for, the more we kind of hold ourselves in sometimes those more painful or uncomfortable or spaces. So it's almost like grab it by the balls and run with it.
And you don't want to go back. You don't want to go back. I look at who I am now comparatively to 6 years ago. I love who I am and I love the changes. It's such a beautiful thing when you do look at yourself and you're like, oh my God, that was so worth it. I rock.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I agree.
I would shout out to Katie Jane, like music has been a massive part. I think especially for a lot of my male friends that have gone through it, that cathartic release of the voice, because music has that ability to transcend what you can't express. So music has been a huge part, like live concerts, huge part of my coping mechanism.
Meditation.
Duh.
Get through without meditation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's some phenomenal input, but just to reiterate, there are amazing practitioners out there, and I look at the beautiful faces on the screen and I don't believe that I would be where I am right now if I didn't have the loving support of these amazing souls in my life. But also from a practitioner level, I know that when I need something specific, I will go to one of these women who just do amazing work. So I highly recommend. And once again, I won't go through it all, but I will put all the details in the description box. So if you do feel that you want to reach out and connect with one of them, absolutely 100%, please go and do that. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, beautiful souls, for being here on another episode of Roundtable. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Your likes, your shares, your comments, your subscribes, all that stuff. And please leave us some comments. We'd love to hear, your experiences and, your feedback. And if there's anything that you would like us to continue in the discussions for the next ones, please leave them there too. So once again, thank you, everybody. And until next time, just sending much love. Bye.
See you, ladies.